Hey everyone, welcome back to another GME video. A couple of things I wanted to discuss today. I do want to discuss upcoming earnings, and I also want to discuss, because I've seen a bunch of comments about it, people asking what makes you think that Ryan Cohn won't dilute even if we do get a big run up here. So I want to discuss those 2 points, and I want to discuss, just pick up right where we left off last week. So last week on Friday, we saw a nice breakout above the daily trigger finally. After rejection here, another rejection here, 2 rejections here, price was finally able to break above the daily trigger and get a strong upside acceleration move. Now, we did have this pullback this week, and if you look at the general market, for example, SPY, this was the open on Tuesday, really nasty week, and IWM also, here was the open on Tuesday, so again, nasty week, closed at the lows. You can see that breakdown below the daily trigger here that led to further downside acceleration. So all things considered, not too bad considering GME is closing at the highs while the rest of the market is closing at the lows. Now, this pullback we did call for. If you look at last week's video, I'll just pull it up really quickly. Now, I guess just one final confirmation. What you like to see in these setups isn't just a runaway move right away. What we like to see is the hourly trigger right here cross above the daily trigger. Price usually pulls back. Let me just draw it out. So we usually see something like this. Where eventually, after this bullish crossover, there will be like a retest. And then what you'll see is the hourly trigger. That. And then price breaks through the hourly trigger here, and that's what starts the big movement. I think we're definitely calling for a pullback. Now, granted, I did not think price would lose the daily trigger and the hourly trigger. That was a little bit surprising to me, but keep in mind, it was some really strong downside market action. So I know a lot of people are getting frustrated, but there's not much I can do when I'm just trying to relay over what the triggers are forecasting for price. So they're forecasting a pullback to the daily trigger, hourly trigger, followed by another move higher. The fact that it's sold below it, there's nothing I could do about it when the market is just pounding down, especially IWM and SPY. So, so much downside pressure. The levels aren't going to be exact. The forecasts aren't going to be exact. But the general idea of it, I think it did track pretty well. We got that pullback and then got that upside move. So if you take a look at the weekly trigger and the monthly trigger here, the weekly trigger is going to jump about 30 cents this week, like last week. So the weekly trigger is going to jump to like 21.30, which means that as long as price does not completely collapse all the way back down to here, the weekly trigger is going to cross the monthly trigger next week. And again, for GME, if you zoom out a bit, and you just take a look at the larger time frame, you'll see here was a bearish weekly trigger, monthly trigger crossover, which flipped all the momentum to the bears, and price went from like 27 all the way down to 10. And if you look here, you could see GME getting that bullish weekly trigger, monthly trigger crossover, followed soon after by a very, very strong melt up. So again, my thesis has been, ever since we saw this original break above the monthly trigger, I've been saying now for multiple months that I think as soon as the weekly trigger is ready to cross above the monthly trigger, that's when price is going to be ready to melt up. And I do think we can have a really strong move, 5, 7x in price. So that would be like about 100. Now, I do know that Ryan diluted at the top of both of these moves. And I want to say that even back then when I was making the videos, I did make sure to say that I did not think this was going to be the real runaway move yet, because the weekly trigger was still so far below the monthly trigger. It's not usually how melt-ups start at all. And monthly strength, this negative shaded purple region, was still negative. So again, I think dilution didn't make such a difference. I don't think these moves were really going to last anyway. And I think now that price is actually ready to melt up, or at least that's the way it seems, I don't think he's going to dilute. If anything, I think these 2 dilutions now gave more of not like a logical reason, but at least some reason for billion war chest why that could possibly explain that type of upside move for GameStop. So overall, my thesis has been that once the weekly trigger crosses monthly trigger, GME will be able to melt up to, let's say, 100. Now, this is it. The weekly trigger is pretty much crossing above the monthly trigger here. Price is above all the triggers. This is either going to work or it's not. I hate the fact that the market overall is so bearish. There's no momentum coming from IWM. There's no momentum coming from the market at all. So GME is fighting through mud on the way up, which I don't love. Not the ideal situation. Obviously, it would be 10 times easier if IWM was lifting instead of just going down further each day. But at the end of the day, you can't argue with the fact that GME closed at the highs of the week while everything else closed at the lows. So it certainly is showing that strength. I think we probably would have had a lot stronger of a move this week if the market hadn't been so bearish. Now, putting that aside, the way it looks right now is I would say that the melt up is probably ready. So I can't guarantee anything. I'm not a prophet. I don't know the future. I don't control the market. All I can give is my best representation of what the triggers are forecasting for price. And that's what I've been doing this whole time. So I do believe that this is it. This is the setup. And it's either going to work or it's not. If it works, fantastic. I've been waiting 4 years. Would love for this to work. This is definitely the best shot that I've seen. This is the first time that we have all the triggers bullish, and the monthly will turn strong bullish next Friday as long as price doesn't collapse with a close above the monthly trigger. If it doesn't work, there's nothing I could really do about it. I'll keep holding. I'll keep waiting. My main point here is that this right now is the best chance of a real melt up all the way since January 2021. Not in any of these places, not here. Not since January 2021 did GameStop have a setup that is calling for a melt up, which is what it is now. So again, if there's if the market completely falls apart, there's not much I can do about it. But in general, these are the kind of trigger setups, especially with a stock like GME, where once it starts moving, there's a lot of FOMO buying, there's a lot of short interest. It could get ignition at any point in time. We know that. So in these type of situations, once the weekly trigger crosses monthly trigger, it symbolizes that bulls have now taken control back from the bears and are ready to bring this higher. And once it starts getting those sparks, those strong upside moves, that's when you could see a lot of FOMO buying, which turn into a melt up. Now, if I was, let's say, looking at any other stock and I see a setup like this, in general, what I look for, go back here. To structure these trades, what I look for is basically at least like a 3 to 5x, I would say, in these type of trades. And in validation is very simple below the weekly trigger. So in this case for GME, if I was entering the trade here, just the trade setup, I'm risking about 12% downside, $3 of downside, whether shares, options, that's the downside I'm risking. And on the flip side, I'm looking to make about $80 of profit or 334% of profit with shares. So this is not this is just how I would structure the trade if I was seeing this unlike any other stock. If I see a bullish weekly trigger, monthly trigger crossover, that's usually more than enough for me to take a longer term position. And then validation is below the weekly trigger, and the target is at least a 3 to 5x. Sometimes you get 7 or 10. So, if this is a setup that looks appealing for you and you want to take a shot, that's on you. I'm just showing you how I would structure these type of trades. If I take this trade, let's say, on a random stock and price loses the weekly trigger, I'm not kicking myself, oh no, I lost money, I'm so upset. I know the risk is small, and I know the potential reward is large, and I know that weekly trigger, monthly trigger crossovers tend to work out pretty well in the bull's favor. So I take a shot. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The market isn't guaranteed in any direction. It's a gamble, it's a risk, and you have to be willing to be okay with your risk getting hit. And if that's what happens, so be it. But to me, when I see a setup like this, it's more than enough for me to take a position. Doesn't mean I'm going to bet my entire life savings on it. Maybe I did, but it doesn't mean I'm going to do that. But as a trader, it's just when I see this type of setup, I like it, and these are the times where I like to take shots. Now, let's just say that GME does make a strong move higher. I don't have to keep my stop loss below the weekly trigger. As the daily trigger starts to rise, and of course there's probably going to be topping signs well earlier, but just in case I don't see them, once GME breaks back below the daily trigger, that's where I'd stop out of the position. So let's just say, for example, it gets to 48 and then breaks below the daily trigger at 40. Once it breaks below the daily trigger, it means that the shorter term upside is at least done for a while, and that's normally where I take profits and then re-enter once price can reclaim the daily trigger. It doesn't mean that it's going to come all the way back down. It just usually means that the first part of the upside move is over once price eventually loses the daily trigger again. For now, no reason to discuss that, but I just wanted to show how I would structure these trades. So it's all in the hands of the market. I will admit, I did think that this bullish crossover was coming a lot earlier. I was wrong, probably by like 2 months. But again, there's a lot that I didn't see coming, and I'm not perfect. And the market took a really, really, really rough turn at one point, which slowed down the progress of the weekly trigger. But you guys know very well and clear that my thesis has always been, once we get that weekly trigger, monthly trigger crossover, GME is in the best spot possible to melt up. So here it is. Here's the setup. I can't promise it's going to work. I can't guarantee it's going to work. This is a setup that tends to lead to extremely strong upside price action. I'm hopeful. I've been here a long time, so I would definitely like to see my shares rise tremendously in value. I would definitely like to make a nice profit on some options. If it doesn't work and price breaks back below 2106, I was wrong. I don't think that will happen, but that is the invalidation for this melt up setup. Right now, the melt up setup is perfect, and this is where I would expect it to start accelerating strongly to the upside. I can't stop, the entire market from coming down and ruining it. Hopefully that doesn't happen. I just have a positive and optimistic approach here. I am trading this with very strict risk management and a strong plan, understanding exactly my risk and exactly my reward. And that's it. Sometimes you just got to take a shot in life. So that's what I did. We'll see if it plays out. Again, not risking anything more than I can afford to lose. Understand the invalidation. I understand the reward. And if it works, great. If not, not. I'm always going to take a chance when the triggers look like this. So good luck to us all. I'm hoping that we do really pick it up in the coming weeks. Now, just wanted to give a quick word about earnings, just in case earnings are bad. And of course, I'll have a much better idea of direction the night before, once our options provider, who is Naked Delta, by the way, if you're not following on Twitter, you definitely should. He was also calling for a strong upside move in GME soon. But of course, none of us, when we look at GameStop in particular, we're not going to say, oh, but the market looks bearish, so I'm bearish on GameStop. I'm going to give my honest view on GameStop, and if the market drags it a little bit more, there's nothing I could do about it. That's what happened this week. I thought we'd pull back only to 22.46. The market was just horrifically bearish all week, and it pulled down a little bit longer. Bruce also, Naked Delta's first name, he was calling for nice upside on GameStop. He posted on Twitter. He's pretty new at the Twitter stuff, actually. So, a lot of people started coming after him quickly, like, oh, you posted bullish GameStop over here. Why is it dropping a little further? He's an excellent analyst, and his stuff aren't always same day or next day. He's just trying to show that the options positioning is turning in a way that's bullish to price action, and we could see things move to the upside. If the market drags it down and keeps a lid on it, so be it. So definitely give him a follow if you aren't already. And so the night before earnings, we'll probably have a better idea of which direction we're going to go. But even if it's a bad earnings, I think the worst case scenario here looks like maybe a strong wick down to the hourly trigger, to the daily trigger, maybe even the monthly or the weekly. But I don't think at this point, once everything already looks set up to explode, that an earnings report is going to be the thing that just kills it and breaks it back down below the weekly trigger. I hope I'm not utterly shocked at a terrible, atrocious earnings. I don't think we will be. Again, I think worst case is a wick down here and then just continue the upside move. I think this is already set in motion. That's the way it looks like for me. Obviously, by next Friday when we do get that cross, it's going to look a lot more like that. But at this point, it's close enough where bulls have taken control of the monthly trigger. It's really hard to see anything else right now. Again, I wish the market was bullish and pumping and IWM was going on a tear. All of that would help so much more and give me so much more confidence in this setup. The fact that SPY and IWM are just so shaky this past week, could continue heading down more next week, could delay things, could slow things down, could bring GME back down. But I don't want to let outside things influence my outlook on GME itself. So GME itself looks beautiful, looks amazing, looks ready to go. Now, if we get a bullish surprise, excellent. I would love a bullish surprise to really kick things off. So that's my opinion here. Guys, I hope you all know I'm just trying my best to, stay optimistic and forecast price action based on what the triggers are telling me without bias. I'm not trying to engagement farm or any of that thing or any of that stuff. I'm really just trying to put the past couple of months, I really was sure that the weekly trigger would cross bullishly above the monthly trigger, which would lead to a melt up, and that's why I've been posting about it. I stuck to my guns. I've been bullish this whole time. Obviously, when I'm saying I'm bullish for a melt up, it doesn't mean every single day we're going to go up. It just means that once weekly trigger crosses monthly trigger, we're in the best possible position to melt up. So I believe we're at that point now, and we're going to find out. It's either going to work or it's not, and I'm ready for both. I do believe that this is going to work. So let's see. Let's hope the market is on our side.